Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Great Day Houston. Warning, today's show is about a basic human interaction. In fact, without it, human beings wouldn't even exist. So if it's so common, why is it so hard to talk about, and why can it be so confusing? It can bring people together or tear them apart. Over history, we can see where it literally started wars or brought peace. On today's show, we're addressing your relationship questions. Our first three guests are all licensed therapists, but they also specialize in sex therapy. There's so much more to it than the act itself. You might want to get young ones out of the room, because this hour we want to give you a chance to ask questions concerning your situation. Is it a lack of intimacy? Is it a sexless marriage? Has there been a case of infidelity? The number to call is 713-533-5230. Again, that's 713-533-5230. First, let's meet our therapist and find out why they chose to include sex therapy as part of their practice. Dr. Emily Jamea is the clinical director of Revive Therapy and Healing. Dr. Jake Porter is the founder of Daring Ventures Counseling, and Ty David Lerman is a licensed psychotherapist with Southwest Psychotherapy Associates. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right. Okay, let me start with you, Emily. You know, for a lot, actually, let me start with a show of hands. How many of you, and you might be a little bit different, did your parents sit you down and say, let me share the birds and the bees with you? All right.
I got a book. I didn't get that speech.
Jake, you raised your hand. Did your parents really share it with you too, or no?
A little bit, and they handed me a book and then asked me if I had questions after I read it.
Yeah, I remember my son asked me, and I couldn't wait, so I snatched that little chicken and egg book, right? And I'm like, so here's the chicken. I get through my whole explanation. He goes, okay, that's great, but we don't have feathers. and he goes, and I doubt, Mom, that you're laying eggs like that. Okay, you were right. All right, Emily, there's a reason why sex was not a mystery for you growing up.
No, my dad is an OBGYN, so fortunately sex was not a taboo in my house growing up. However, that was not the case for most of my peers. And so I think from a very young age, people came to me with questions. And so I was giving sex advice long before I was a
third grade.
Yeah,
and my mom tried to show me a chicken book, Emily,
right.
So yeah, that's not how it happens.
Exactly.
All right. Dr. Porter, you said like they gave you a book. And Ty, what about for you?
So my father was also a sex therapist. So it was regular conversation at the dinner table. It kind of desensitized me to the topic, and very similar. I was talking about sex very early.
You were that kid.
Well, my parents also wanted to make sure I had the right information. They're like, you're going to get it somewhere. I'd rather give you the right information than find bad information on the playground.
Which is interesting, because that's what parents all say is, I want to give this information. That's why, you know, we battle back and forth whether schools should do it or not. They're like, no, that's up to me. The only problem is most parents don't do that, right?
Don't.
Okay. When it comes to being a sex therapist, as I mentioned in the introduction there, there's so much more to it than the act itself. And I think a lot of people have a misconception about what a sex therapist is. They think, oh, you know that Kama Sutra stuff. Is that what y'all do? Yeah, no, okay. Right.
That stuff can be great fun, but no, I think our work as sexologists is really about looking at the broader picture and what may be contributing to someone's sexual or relationship issues. So we are treating trauma, we are doing couples counseling, we are helping people through life adjustment issues, we are helping people overcome infidelity. So there's so much more to sex therapy, I think, than what people think about.
Speaking of infidelity, Dr. Porter, this is one of the things that you zero in on, and there's an interesting way of how you do therapy.
Yeah, so I'm actually not a sex therapist, I'm a sex addiction therapist. And so a lot of the clients I get have gone through chronic betrayals. And so I do intensives with couples. We bring them in, we help them tell the whole truth. We actually validate it with a polygraph, and then I work for 2-3 days at a time helping them begin to rebuild trust, lay a foundation, start something new.
Yeah, because a lot of people will think, can you restore a relationship after infidelity? And there's sex addiction, which is a little bit different than just infidelity, but it all kind of sits in the same place. All right, Ty, you focus on insight and implementation. Just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy, is one of the sayings that you have.
There's so much, yeah. I talk about, like, all of self-help, all of therapy boils down to this two components: the insight of having a greater understanding about why we do what we do, what leads us to do these patterns of behaviors, thinkings, feelings, but that's only half the battle. Like Freud, one of the few things we actually took from Freud is insight is not enough. It's the catalyst for change, but it's not change itself. And so the second part is just as important as the implementation, is what do we actually do once we have that insight?
Yeah, all right. The hard thing about sex is that it literally, it is the most common thing. I mean, birds do it, cows do it, all of them do it, right? Yep. But we have these hang-ups, and a lot of the conflicts we have, of course, is with religion, at the base of religion. Mm-hmm. And it's like you're having a sensationship instead of a relationship. The conflict between sex and religion, but the Bible says go forth and procreate.
but don't enjoy it, right? There's sins of the flesh. We see the stories of Jezebel, who's power hungry and a whorish woman, and then Sodom and Gomorrah, adultery and evilness. So we see all this, and it creates a conflict in us.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opposing views and feelings when it comes to sexuality and how that fits into religion and spirituality for people. I mean, I always remind people at the time that these scripts were written, things have changed, and a lot of times we pick and choose things that fit in our lives these days. However, when it comes to sexuality, a lot of times people latch on to these kind of outdated messages.
Yeah.
You know, at the time that this was written, a lot of people were having babies in their teens, and that's just not the case
let's face
today.
it though, we used to have, basically around 12 is when we come into that hormone shift, right? That's the natural human thing that happens. We used to like get married at 12, have babies, and die at 24.
Right.
Right? And so you had to hurry, chop, hurry up, honey. You find yourself a husband. I'm only 10, we'll start looking, right? But the thing is, we're living longer today, but what didn't adjust itself on the front end is the fact that we are still at around that age. So it's harder to negotiate, I think. It's difficult, right?
Yeah, I think that our culture, we've seen a lot of the cultural scripts that help people navigate that. You know, there's a revolution happening, but also, there's just been a lot of shame built in that I don't think was necessarily there. I mean, Deborah, I was a pastor for 13 years before I came into this work. And I would tell people, the very first command in the Bible, you couldn't obey without sex. It's not really a sex negative book if you come at it with maybe some fresh eyes and a different look.
Yeah. All right. Then there's the battle of the sexes. How we look at people. It's like if a man has sex, he's just being manly. Look at him, he's so sexy. A woman having sex, especially out of marriage, she's the Jezebel. So we still have that connotation to deal with as well.
That divide is something that we continue to battle, and women have been oppressed in so many ways, especially about sexuality, that we still are not getting over. And so we are continuing to battle that. And a lot of our work as sex therapists and working around this topic is really giving people permission to experience what they're already experiencing.
Right.
Like so much of this is we put ourselves in denial about what we feel, what we want, our pleasure, our pain, and women have been robbed of their voice to be able to voice those things. And a lot of our work is giving women their voice back.
Yeah. All right. Sex can be used in so many different ways, right? I look at it sometimes as sideways communication, when you can't actually say some things with your words. Either you're conscious of it or it's subconsciously. It comes out there, like rejecting sex. If you're angry or you feel taken advantage of, it's like, no, not tonight. I have a headache. Well, that headache's been going on for 2 months. Yeah, I still have that headache. But and then for other people, sometimes it's using sex to feel successful. But as a friend of mine said, she goes, I know it empowers him, but I feel like I'm being used because he's like, basically, I'm there, but he's having sex by himself, is what she was thinking, right? So it's like, she's like, I'm not a toy for you, type of thing. So the communication, it comes out, and the thing I mentioned earlier, that's not about the act itself, it's what's leading up to it and what you've dealt with. You mentioned trauma, but sometimes it's just everyday things that are going on in your life between each other.
Totally. I mean, there is a huge link between relationship satisfaction and sexual satisfaction. So if the climate in the relationship is one that is filled with resentment or conflict, or if someone feels used or not prioritized, that is going to translate into the sexual experience as well and cause problems. So it's not uncommon at all for someone not to desire sex if they don't feel emotionally seen or heard in their relationship.
Yeah, and then I don't know how much of this is a myth, but oftentimes we think for men, you can have sex and forget about it. They can be like, well, she didn't mean anything to me. And for women, we have to be invested in you.
Yeah.
Do you find that in your?
I think that's a little bit of the battle of the sexes. I think that there's some assumptions that is true, and I think that there may be some truth in that, but that's not always true. Certainly, men are capable, or there are men who are demisexual, and they must have that emotional connection in order to be sexual or to be aroused, and vice versa. Women are perfectly capable of having casual sex and not having that attachment.
Yeah.
So I think if you think about it, it's kind of a standard bell curve. Like there's the general centerpiece where most people fall, but then there's certainly outliers for both genders.
Yeah, all right, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, I think another assumption is that men are the big cheaters. Women don't do this as much as men, okay? Hold your thought, Dr. Porter, right over there. And then also the whole idea of sexless marriages. We're hearing people talk about that more. Stay with us. We'll be right back with our therapist taking your relationship questions all hours. So give us a call at 713-533-5230. Again, that's 713-533-5230. 713-533-5230.
Talk dirty to me.
Oh, okay. We are back with our relationship experts taking your questions. They all specialize in sex therapy in particular. Number to call right there on your screen, 713-533-5230. All right, Meg has our first question. Speaking of the song, she says, I want my husband to talk dirty to me during sex, but that's not really his style. How can I get him to loosen up a bit without hurting his feelings?
Such a great question. I remind my couples, because it's so common for someone to have a preference that maybe doesn't completely match what the other person is interested in. I always tell them to check their automatic no reactions. And it can be really helpful to create a list where there are things that are, for sure, are hard no's for you. And then there are things that are maybes. Maybe it's not your top thing to do sexually, but it's not something you necessarily have a problem with. And then there are things that you really want to do. And if something is really important to your partner, and maybe it's not totally your thing, but you don't necessarily have a fundamental problem with it, then I think it's in part your responsibility to kind of meet your partner where they are.
Yeah. All right. We have Emily on the line this morning. Good morning, Emily. Emily, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right. What's your question for us?
Just one moment.
All right. Getting it together there. Emily, are you at work? You're supposed to be at work right now.
No, I'm walking outside. I don't want to say this in there.
All right. Okay. So what's your question?
Okay, I am outside. Okay, so I had horrible surgery 4 years ago. It changed our life. I'm in a wonderful marriage. And it's changed our sex life. And it's hurtful in the marriage because it makes him feel like I don't want him. And I'm so in love. And
so let me ask you this. Has it changed your sex life because of libido, or is there pain involved?
First it was pain, and it's also the libido.
Okay.
So I don't know what to do.
Yeah, well, libido, there are things to do. Okay, so Mama's talking to you right now.
Yes.
Talking to your doctor, it may be a thing with a little bit of testosterone and some hormones that can help with things like that. But then if there's pain, then there's maybe perhaps some adjustments to be made.
Yes. And what kind of surgery did she say she had?
What kind of surgery was that, Emily?
I almost died. I had an abdominal aortic aneurysm, and then infection. I lost my spleen, and they saved most of my organs. I was down for so long, it made myself like a virgin.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there are so certain other parts may be working, and there are different ways to get to the end result.
Definitely. I think so. I see this a lot when people aren't sexual for long periods of time, whether it's in the postpartum period or maybe people took a break for whatever reason. And a lot of times people are waiting for this spontaneous desire to just show up. And we can't think of desire always as happening spontaneously. Yeah. Desire is something that, especially in long-term relationships, we have to actively cultivate. Yeah. And that may be especially challenging for her given the fact that she's gone through this traumatic experience. It's not uncommon for people who go through trauma to notice that their libido kind of goes to sleep for a while because you're in survival mode.
In menopause, you're like it goes to sleep for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're like, don't look at me. So maybe a couple things, obviously talking to a doctor who deals with some hormone therapy or an OBGYN, and then talking to a sex therapist about how to re-engage.
Right. I mean, hormones can be a piece of the puzzle, but they are not the whole puzzle.
They're not the whole puzzle, no.
Especially for women, there is so much more going on to our sexuality. And when we take a comprehensive look at the research, we cannot blame our hormones for as much as we would like.
Girl, I had a little touch of testosterone, and I'm like, okay, all right, okay.
And around the pain, I think connecting with a sex therapist would be really helpful because there are certainly exercises and tools and toys and things that we can use to explore to help work through that pain. And sometimes it's really helpful to connect with a pelvic floor specialist, depending on the type of pain that you're experiencing. And so it really just kind of depends. And so connecting with a therapist
to find out what the source of it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, find out what the source of it is from our head down to the whole body there. All right, Kelly. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
What's your question?
So me and my husband are newly married, but we are up in age. He's acting like a newly teenage boy that just found his manhood. And I'm back here feeling like an old lady. So how do I communicate to him that I need a little bit more foreplay?
Mm-hmm. You know, and that
Without
oftentimes
hurting
is what we hear women say is, can we lead up to something as opposed to like acting like we're trying to do some time management here? Can we lead up to something? And so that's another, I think, maybe misconception, is that men just want to, there you go, and then, you know, women are like, you know, talk dirty to me or bring me a necklace or something, right?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
I hate the word foreplay versus sex. I think it's all sexual, and there are things that you do that involve intercourse, and there are things that you do that don't involve intercourse. And a lot of women will say the things that they find to be the most pleasurable are the things that don't necessarily involve intercourse.
Yeah.
And so it's about talking to your partner about what you find the most pleasurable and making sure that they're willing to work with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that the piece around the discordance here is there's just the communication. So much of this is about just opening your mouth and having a conversation, and it's really hard because we're so stigmatized around sex. We're conditioned for this. Our society is conditioned for this. Our parents, our church, so many things repress our sexuality. But this is part of being human, and so it's okay to just simply start talking about what your needs are.
Yeah, and then watch National Geographic when they had that bird special, because they're like this, the bird's like doing all this different stuff. He's leading up to it, and so like you can learn from the birds. There's a reason why they call it birds and bees. All right, we're taking your relationship questions all hour. Give us a call, 713-533-5230. We'll be right back, and I'll get to that question I asked earlier: who cheats more, men or women?
She's a super freak, she's super freaking.
All right, I remember when this song came out. Okay, let's go back to the phone lines. Raul, good morning.
Good morning.
What's
Thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. What's your question or comment?
So yeah, my question was actually, I know that I have a very high sex drive, and my girlfriend, well, to me, I would want to say she has like a lower sex drive than me. Like, I could, I'm willing to have sex every day, but I just feel like I'm trying to figure out if it's a personal problem. Like, I want to know like how I can control that or what, because I have communicated with her about it, but she kind of just dismisses it. It's not really.
Hold on the line there, because a lot of couples do have that issue of being mismatched. It's just not balanced. And I love the fact that you're asking about it and you tried to communicate with it about it. Okay, so some leading questions to ask. What would that be?
Oh goodness. Are you talking about it? It sounds like you are talking about it, but in what way are you talking? Are we actually asking for a specific ask from your partner in terms of, are you asking for her to be more sexual with you, or for you to initiate, for her to initiate?
And what's her reason? Are you just tired? Is she working an 18-hour day that we don't know about, right? But it's like, I guess there's the obvious questions up front. What's your reason for not wanting to have sex as often? Is part of it?
And we don't want to ask that question just of the lower desire partner. We always want to ask that question of the higher desire partner too. Is this a coping mechanism to relieve stress or anxiety? Is it the only tool you have in your toolbox to release tension? And so a lot of people are guilty of pathologizing the lower desire partner, and we really want to avoid that.
Yeah. So what is your answer to that, Raul?
Like personally, I mean, I guess to me it's more like I love just being intimate, in general, and then second, it is kind of like I guess something that I do look for, it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
But I have talked about it with her, not really asking her what I need, it's more like explaining to her how I feel about it. But it's, I don't know, I guess a little complicated. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. It's crazy how sex can be so common, but it can be complicated. So to Emily's point, about is it a stress relief for you? So maybe going to the gym a little bit, could that help out? Right. And then from her, because sometimes, literally, you're right. We do stigmatize the lower, but sometimes someone just has a straight up answer, especially like there's a friend of mine they got 4 kids.
Yeah.
She deals with all the kids,
Yeah.
right? And the husband does go to work and come home, but she's like, I've been here all day, I'm worn out.
Chore
right?
play is a
Exhausting.
thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important, and we talked about a bell curve earlier, but sexuality and sex drive is also on a bell curve. And we have people who are on the outliers that are really hypersexual, and we have people on the low end of the scale that are on the gray scale or even asexual. I mean, this whole segment is talking kind of a little bit about sex and relationships, but we need to make sure we name that there are people that are asexual, and that this is not a part of what they want. Their sex drive is almost non-existent, if at all. And that is perfectly okay. That's not necessarily a problem, but when it becomes a problem for our relationship and my partner, it's the mismatch that we have to navigate through.
And almost like where y'all come in, like having maybe some therapy to try to figure out what the issue is there. Okay, so I had asked before the break, the misconception I think is that men are all the cheaters and women, no, it's not so much.
Not so much. Women absolutely cheat as well. But what I found in my practice, and I've worked where it goes both ways gender-wise, is that often men respond differently. And I think there's a lot of cultural reasons for that, social reasons, how we're socialized. Men seem to have a different type of shame around being the one that's betrayed. And so I think, at least in my experience, that often keeps them from seeking help, as we see when it's the other way around.
Yeah. All right. Gregory, good morning. Greggy, can you hear us?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
All right. What's your question or comment?
Oh, well, it was just a simple question, like, what happens to my body when I when I don't have sex for like a year?
Okay, so like not having sex, you're kind of like use it or lose it type thing. And, and I'm going to say something that, okay, don't tweet me, don't Facebook, don't call, don't whatever. But I remember a friend of mine who was talking, had a real good relationship with his mom. His mom turned around and looked at him one day and said, honey, it's not going to fall off because you don't use it. Yeah. She goes, because I understand you're frustrated, but it's not going to fall off. All right.
Exactly.
So his point is, if you don't have sex for quite some time, what happens to your body?
Nothing bad is going to happen to your body. People have periods of abstinence or celibacy all the time, and nothing bad is going to happen. I mean, we do know that sex is healthy in most cases. Particularly for men having regular orgasms, there's evidence to show that can help reduce their risk of prostate cancer. So, it's good for you, but nothing bad is going to happen if you don't do it.
All right. Okay. So there you go. Take your time and find the right person. Okay. We'll be right back with more of your relationship questions after this. All right, we'll get to money in a second, but if you just now are joining us, we're talking about sex. If you got young ones in the room, scoot-a-doodle. Okay, unless you're okay with it, right? All right, let's go to the phone lines. Dee, good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Good. What is your question or comment?
Okay, so my husband had a stroke in 2020, and I wanted to know, ever since then, after his orgasms, he has these excruciating headaches, and I wanted to know if that's normal or if it's something that we need to get investigated.
Yes. So that can happen. There's a clinical term for it, which is I'm forgetting right now, but it's when you get a severe headache or even migraine after having an orgasm. And I think it's tied to blood pressure and heart rate and that sort of thing. As far as what interventions are available, I believe that there are some, but that would be something that they would need to check with their medical doctor, maybe a neurologist.
Yeah, and you're right to ask, and maybe check with the doctor who treated him for the stroke as well.
Yeah, anytime there's pain, it's important that you do check in with your doctor.
Yeah. All right. Okay, this question's from Linda. She says, I'm a saver and my husband is a spender. It's not cute and it's ripping my marriage apart, and now it's showing up in the bedroom. How can I get him to be more responsible? Okay, so there's a mix of things going on right here. As we talked about earlier, how sex can be used in different ways. When she says it's showing up in the bedroom, I'm not sure if what she means about who's in control of that moment right there. But unless the playing field is kind of leveled, sometimes sex is complicated.
Totally. I mean, anything that's causing relationship conflict can show up in the bedroom. So if you are on polar opposites of any area of your life and that's causing resentments or conflict in your relationship, that can show up.
Yeah, there are some couples that they have this rule that we don't go to sleep angry at each other, but we also don't bring our issues into the bedroom.
Of course.
Easier said than done.
And the question that I had was like, what is he spending money on in the bedroom? Like, what?
What
Now, there's many people where sex is a hobby. So they engage in recreational stuff. They may be into some BDSM stuff, like toys and lingerie. It gets expensive, and so my question is, where is it spending? And if it is indeed a hobby in a certain way, then it's appropriate to treat it like a hobby financially and set aside a budget for it.
Yeah, but I don't think he's spending money in the bed. They're just both bickering with each other over money, right?
Yeah.
And
The bickering is getting
she says
into
it's
the
showing
rest of the
up in the bedroom because she's like, well, no, don't even look at me because you bought a new lawnmower and didn't need one. Don't even look at me, right? That type of thing. So yeah, all those other issues. But good point.
Either way,
maybe that is
it needs to be talked
Either
about.
way, okay. I need to try to hunt her down and get some clarification. Okay, Craig. Danger. He says, my girlfriend has mentioned that a threesome with her best friend would be fun. She's kind of kidding, but kind of not at the same time. I don't know how you kind of kid about that. She goes, I think I could handle it, but I also worry that it could damage the closeness we have. What should I do?
Great question.
Let's talk to the guys about that one.
I'm excited about this question.
Okay.
I love that we're talking about things that are more than just monogamy, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good or bad. Monogamy is not for all people. And more than monogamy is not for all people, and that's perfectly okay. Again, it's a lot about communication and discussion. I have a little red flags about it being the best friend because that has there's more there than just the sex connected to it. It could damage the relationship. It could damage their relationship, and so there's a lot that needs to be discussed there. So again, it's a lot about communication.
Yeah, and what you're inviting. Okay.
Oh, and a lot of the questions. Sorry, the book to read about that is Building Open Relationships by Liz Powell. It's fantastic, and anybody who's even entertaining the idea about open relationships or polyamory, that's my Bible. That's the one I refer to everyone to.
Yeah. All right. Cindy says, my husband is spending a lot of time at happy hour with his female boss. He says, it's all business, but I ain't buying it. I don't want to be that girl, but this has to stop. Should I give him an ultimatum? All right, Dr. Porter, there are red flags that extra things could be going on. Now, if you're spending late hours at the office, I'm on alert. But if all those late hours are in a happy hour.
Sure, yeah. I would say this is definitely one of these things where you got to trust your gut and you've got to share that and communicate that with your partner. And this is really about a boundary, which I like to use the phrase important emotional request. And can you just be really clear? I'm uncomfortable with this. I don't know that this is the type of relationship I want to be in. I don't know if I want to continue if you keep doing this. That's my choice. Yeah. What's yours?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And I'd be like, because otherwise I'm going to have to show up, give me a crown and seven, and I'm going to sit in the corner and see what's going on right here.
I think I want to add one thing. I think when it comes to friends of the opposite sex, you also have to ask yourself the question, is this a friend of the relationship? How would, I forgot which one was spending time at happy hour, but how would they feel if their spouse came and joined them for a drink? And could that potentially make them feel more comfortable? Yeah. So that's something to explore as well.
Yeah, it's your boss. You work at work and you have happy hour. Well, here's the thing. The thing that kind of I think perked up her ears is that it's a lot of time at happy hours versus, hey, we've got a happy hour this, Friday, that's it. But you keep having happy hours. We don't need to be in that happy.
It's time away from her.
Mario asked this question. He says, and this happens a lot. It comes down to, forgiveness and can you really forgive but not forget. I cheated on my wife 3 years ago. I never told her, and our marriage is in a great place, but the guilt has never gone away. Do I tell her or risk her finding out from someone else?
Ooh, such a great
layers
question.
Of complication here.
Layers.
Yeah.
I say truth. That's what
He's the
I
pastor.
think.
Ye shall know the truth. The truth shall set you free.
The truth, as a pastor, but also as a clinician, I've just seen what happens when you invest in your relationship, but you're building on a foundation that's not solid. And then it's like trip insurance, right? Like tell the truth, it costs you more up front, but later on if it comes out, it could blow the whole thing up and you could lose a lot of ground.
Yeah. Okay. So, and is that a form of dishonesty? By omission?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think this is a walk of integrity.
That's right.
Like, is this consistent with the human, the man, the person that I want to be? Of holding the secret from the person I'm supposed to love and respect the most in this world.
Yeah.
That's.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yikes.
Yikes. Okay. Stephanie says, I dated my husband for 10 years before we finally tied the knot. Then we got divorced a year later. I haven't dated since I was a teen. When is a healthy time to get back out there?
no time like the present.
Go
Right?
Yeah, I think, it's not like there's a standard of, amount of time that you should wait. I think when you're feeling pretty good about who you are and you're open to meeting new people and trying out relationships, I think that's what dating is kind of, I think a lot of people think you have to have it all figured out before you enter the dating world. And that is not the case at all. Dating, figuring things out comes with dating.
Yeah, and there's no special time that right person may come along.
Exactly.
Right?
There's not.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people set rules for themselves, or like, I'm not going to date for 2 months for every year that I was married, or like whatever it was. And it's just, it's less about the time and more about what's going on internally. And if you're ready, if you've healed, or you're ready to even entertain the idea of dating and being romantic with another person, if you're ready, then go.
Yeah.
If you're not, then don't.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. You're in control of your own love life.
right.
Okay, we'll be right back. All right, Madonna, we'll get to that in a minute. We're back answering your relationship questions. On our panel are the clinical director of Revive Therapy and Healing, Dr. Emily Jamea, licensed professional counselor, Dr. Jake Porter, founder of Daring Adventures Counseling, and sex therapist with Southwest Psychotherapy Associates, Ty David Lerman. Okay, we have Lisa on the phone. Good morning, Lisa. Lisa, can you hear us?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. What's your question?
Okay, my question is, I'm 61, my husband is 77, and he has no desire for sex, but I still have sexual feelings, and we haven't had sex in like over 3-4 years now.
Yeah, and so...
And it kind of leaves me feeling like angry all the time. So I don't know, what do I do?
Feeling rejected, right? But this is where, again, I guess the why comes in, right?
Right. So, I mean, I want to normalize this for a second. Experiencing discrepancy in your sexual desire is the most common issues that sex therapists are faced with. However, it is the most complex and complicated issue to treat because there are so many factors that may be at play. And so when it comes to feeling lonely or rejected in your relationship, I think it's important to talk to your partner about that and also tell them what they can do specifically to help you feel seen and heard in other ways.
Lisa, does he tell you why? He just says he's just not interested?
Well, after he was diagnosed with removed his bladder.
Okay. So some physical issues. Yeah. And at 77, we certainly know that even like erectile dysfunction and things like that become more of an issue as men age. And there are things out there that, I know somebody had a question about, do things like medications work? They do help. May not be 100%, but they can help. But if there's a physical reason, you got to work through that.
I think it's so important to broaden the way we think about sex and what sex is. Adaptability is one of the key ingredients for long-term relationship satisfaction. And so it may be starting off with just some skin-to-skin touching, and seeing what feelings that evokes, or taking a shower together. There are other ways that you can evoke eroticism that don't necessarily have to do with intercourse the way you've traditionally thought of it.
All right. Sean, my son has just started college and he's a virgin. This really bothers him, but at the same time, he doesn't want to have sex with just anybody. How do I convince him how commendable that is, and there's nothing wrong with waiting for someone you actually connect with?
Wow.
The integrity.
Absolutely.
Like we were just talking about. Go.
Yeah. Stay true to that compass inside of you, and that's a great value that you want it to be about connecting with someone. And I'll say this as well, because I hear a lot of people's stories as they're doing these disclosures and coming clean with their people. A lot of people lie about how much sex they're having in college.
Or when they did.
Or when they did.
Exactly. Because they'll ask, are you a virgin? And it's like, no, not me, right? Yeah.
He may not be as alone in this as he thinks he is.
Oh, yeah. I work with men every day who talk about how important an emotional connection is for them in order to feel sexual with someone. It's way more.
And it's interesting because, again, that battle of the sexes thing, we always assume
those
that
stereotypes.
guys, they've had like so much sex by the time they even got to college, right? And not necessarily the case. Okay. Here we go. Samuel, my wife went through some childhood abuse, and there are certain things that trigger her and turn her off when we're intimate. She doesn't want to go to therapy to talk about it. Any advice? That is so hard if you can't get those things out yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, experiencing trauma can really affect the way you express yourself sexually. I think if she is completely opposed to the idea of working through it with someone who specializes in trauma, which there are so many great options available, so I really hope that she would reconsider. But really, all he can do is respect her boundaries and really double down on the things that she does, you know, enjoy.
All right. Dee, good morning, Dee. Dee, can you hear us? All right, what's your question?
My question is, I've been married over 5 years, and my husband, he say he don't know how to get in the mood or make love, or he don't know how to approach me.
Okay, so are you having sex, or he's just the one that never initiates it?
We haven't had it in a while.
Okay. All right. The communication thing comes up again, but
Yeah, I've got a lot of questions, that I would want to ask. It could be so many different things. Is there something physical going on? Is there something missing, in the relationship? Is there something that's not being talked about? But, is he being sexual in other ways? Is he being sexual with himself? Is he a pornography user? And I'm not here to villainize that, but these are all questions that need to be brought out on the table to figure out what's really going on for her.
Yeah. So
And I think putting yourself out there is such a vulnerable state. To put yourself out there, hey, I want to share myself physically and emotionally with you, can be really scary.
Yeah, because at the base of it, we're thinking, am I going to be rejected?
Exactly.
And the rejection is just such a tough thing, which is, the deal is that at least you can know at some point, either work through it and it can be great, or if you can't work through it, then you know what your next steps might be. But at the end of the day, at the base of almost everything that you all said today, you have to have open, honest communication, and don't be afraid of what the answer might be. All of you, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks all of you who called in. So our relationship experts for joining us. To connect with Dr. Emily Jamea, visit emilyjamea.com. Dr. Jake Porter's website is drjakeporter.com, and Ty Lerman can be reached at swpsychotherapy.com.